But when I think about why they're calling me an anti-Semite, it goes back to that basic need of safety. We all need safety. I left my country because I wanted more safety. The Jews left Europe because they wanted more safety when they came to Palestine. And the Palestinians are fighting to have their safety. So at the end of the day, if you trace back these tensions, they come back to some form of basic need.
I joined Hani on a podcast episode of Superhumanizer. And as he said, it was love at first sight. It was just magic. Like sometimes there's a moment where you meet someone and it's like red spring of fate, red spring of fate. Like we were supposed to find each other in every lifetime. And Hani was definitely one of those people for me.
Hello and welcome to Urgent Futures, the show that finds signal in the noise. I'm your host, Jesse Damiani. I'm a writer, curator, and professor who's on a continual quest to learn about reality and how it's evolving. Each week, I sit down with leading thinkers whose research, concepts, and questions clarify the chaos, from culture to the cosmos. My guests this week are Katie Bogen and Hani Chaabo. Katherine Wela Bogen is a clinical psychology PhD student and reconstructionist Jewish woman dedicated to empowering sexual abuse survivors. Her research on interpersonal violence and human sexuality has been published in numerous peer-reviewed journals. Beyond academia, she organizes international feminist psychology conferences, speaks at national political campaigns, and shares her stories and social commentary with millions on Instagram and TikTok. Raised in an American Jewish family by the son of a Holocaust survivor, Katie interrogated her inherited understanding of Zionism at a college level and fostered relationships with anti-carceral human rights activists globally. With degrees in political science and clinical psychology, her diverse experiences inform her commitment to direct action for social change. Integrating anti-carceral, anti-racist, and anti-colonial feminist principles into her work, Katie passionately advocates for the full political enfranchisement of both Palestinians and Jews. Dr. Hani Chaabo is board certified in Family, Integrative, and Addiction Medicine. He completed training in family medicine at West Virginia University, a fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, and the Primary Care Psychiatry, Addiction Medicine, and Child and Adolescent Psychiatry fellowship certification programs at the University of California, Irvine. He has worked with Middle Eastern refugees, marginalized LGBTQ communities, and steered national-scale public health projects. He is currently Chief Clinical and Wellness Officer at El Dorado Community Health Center in California. During his time as Medical Director of Wellbeing at Ridgecrest Regional Hospital, he was awarded by the American Medical Association's Joy in Medicine Healthcare System Recognition Program. He established Ridgecrest's first addiction medicine and integrative medicine programs. Together, these two host the superb Superhumanizer podcast, in which they seek to, quote, journey into the heart of humanity's most polarizing challenges, guided by the belief that empathy and understanding can bridge the widest divides. They have hosted some of the most thoughtful, informative conversations for my own deepening understanding of the genocide in Gaza and in the legacy of Zionism, all with a remarkable tenderness and care. What I so appreciate about their work is that they take topics that are often abstracted and thinky and bring them down to earth, to something felt. These conversations foreground empathy and reaching across divides, as opposed to the simplistic binaries that we so often encounter online, which are designed to provoke and enrage. Unsurprisingly, they are both heart-led public intellectuals in their own right, contributing much-needed reminders that even in the face of all the righteous anger we may feel, the real work is to advocate for empathy and understanding as ancient tools for building bridges across divides, especially the ones that at first seem impossible. I'm so excited for you to spend some time with this necessary conversation with Katie Bogen and Hani Chaabo. All right, I'm so lucky to be joined today by Dr. Hani Chaabo and doctoral candidate Katie Bogen. Both, thank you so much for being on Urgent Futures.
Thank you.
So excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
So I felt like it was only fitting to start this conversation with a brief round of what brings you joy. So Katie, you're next to me in the video, so I'm going to start with you. Katie, what brings you joy?
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
So I turned 32 yesterday. I just had a birthday.
Mm,
And I also am coming out with my debut novel in January. And I, like, on a whim, posted, like, hey, if you want to help me celebrate my birthday, pre order my book. And I got like hundreds of
wow.
messages of people being like, I've pre ordered, I've pre ordered. And so I got like birthday joy and reflection on my last year joy and also literary support joy all packaged into
Mm,
one yesterday. And I feel like I'm still riding the high.
mm.
So that's bringing me joy. Who should I pass it off to, Jesse or Honey?
No, I think Hani. You go to Hani.
Honey, my love, what brings you
This
joy?
is bringing me so much joy right now. So much joy because obviously this is a game we play to really like lighten up the mood before we get into some deep, dark things. And I think the world needs more joy. So us starting with playing this game and knowing that that's coming from your inner child, Jesse, is bringing me a lot of joy. And also, I will steal one since I can, since I'm here and I'm not a host. I can just do this off a whim. What brings me joy also is celebrating Katie's birthday, and knowing that her birthday is coinciding with her new book. It's 2 years ago when Katie and I met, I told her one day we're going to celebrate you being a big famous author, and here we are. So that brings me also a lot of joy. Jesse, Habibi, what brings you joy?
Well, not to be too corny here, but having this conversation with you both brings me a lot of joy. In addition to your individual works, which I want to touch on, obviously, as we go, um, I'm also just such a fan of what you're doing at Superhumanizer, and love the chance to be able to dive into it directly with
Thank
you.
you.
We'll do. I mean, y'all do a few rounds, so I think we got to do the full play. So, Katie, back to you. What brings you joy?
So I don't know if y'all could hear before, I just put myself on mute, but my cats have been meowing meowing in the background, and I
Mm,
just got to go to a cousin's wedding this past weekend
mm,
and see my cousin Sarah marry her husband Mark, and it was such a beautiful
mm,
day, and like their love was so so so
mm,
pure. And I got to reflect on like what are some of the purest loves in my life, and like my partnership, my friends, my family, and my cats. Like coming home to my cats and hearing them be needy in the background, it's like a little reminder of like love is everywhere.
mm,
Love is wherever you decide to look for it.
mm.
So I had like a really emotional, reflective day at this wedding, and I'm being reminded of it just by hearing the cats meow today.
Mm.
So that's bringing me joy. Honey, baby, what's bringing you
Oh,
joy?
I love that. I will also say love brings me joy because I am here in San Francisco celebrating 16 years with my husband. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Quite a feat. I know how to even get here. It's really surprising some days because it's definitely not a journey that's full of joy all the time. That's for sure. It's riddled with many challenges. But 16 years of love is definitely something that brings me pride as much as it brings me joy. And knowing that I can share whatever lessons I've learned about love with all the people around me to help them with their love as well, that also brings me joy. Jesse, back to you. What brings you joy?
Well, I'll build. I love that. And yes, for folks who maybe aren't as familiar, San Francisco is a famously aquatic
Mm-hmm.
space for love and
Mm-hmm.
romance. So it's wonderful to hear that you and your husband have tread those waters beautifully. For me, I was telling Katie right before we started. My partner and I, we moved to the Hudson Valley in the summer, and so we've been in this process of, trying to get our kind of home up to the ideal that we have for it. And this week has been a work of a lot of week and a lot of intense discussions, and really feel like we're coming through it in a way that feels both that our relationship is stronger, but also this home that we're making is becoming what we imagined it to be. So feeling really joyful about that. Last round, Katie, what is bringing you joy?
Okay, so I would love to come up with something like deeply philosophical and moving and about like the politics of the world, but the politics of the world are definitely not bringing me a lot of joy right now. Community building does, but part of that community building for me over the last few months has been building my partnership. I have like this wonderful new partner, but he is in France, and in one week. I get to see him again after not seeing each other for like 2 whole months. I've been genuinely losing it. Not 2 whole months, a little over a month. I'm just being dramatic and hyperbolic
You
because I miss
deserve
him
it.
a
You
lot.
deserve it.
Yeah, thank you. I am truly beside myself. So I get to be back in Paris. I have a whole new activist community out in Paris, including a group of like ex-Israeli military folks who are now peace activists for a liberated Palestine and like a single secular state. So I'll get to reconnect with some of the folks I've met through activism out there, and like the community of women who have also fallen in love with European people and moved to
Of
France.
course, there's that
So I
too.
have like little pockets of community. Yes, there's like a
Of
big
course.
group in Paris of mostly girlies I've met who are like, oh yeah, I traveled abroad and American men really got to raise the bar. So I get to see all of these lovely people and engage in community rest and see my partner and kiss his perfect face. And I'm very excited. That's bringing me joy. Hani, my love, what is bringing you joy?
So I am here with my husband's best friend, who's also visiting from Lebanon, who I haven't seen in probably like 10 years. So that's been really lovely and bringing me joy. However, he's a dad and he has a 3-year-old daughter. And now I'm at the age where all my friends are having kids and they're all like 3 and 4 and they're so young. And just talking about kids has become a lot of the conversation in like my friends group, which is really beautiful because I don't have kids and I really get to hear their lessons and how they're growing as human beings and how challenging it is, and at the same time how magical it is and all the beautiful things that kids say. And then all the difficult conversations that we should be having with our kids. So like one thing that came up yesterday was talking about representation of everybody in children's books, especially gay people. And we had like a back and forth conversation, which, is pretty challenging for people that are coming from the Middle East, to even have this kind of conversation about exposing their kids to that. And by the end of the conversation, there was really a beautiful mutual understanding about, you know what? Yes, we should be the Mr. Rogers and Miss Rachels of the world and have difficult conversations with our kids and represent everyone. And even if they ask, why do they have 2 dads? Why shouldn't I just be the person that says, yes, absolutely, it's a normal thing? And to me, that kind of conversation where we can just like not agree for a moment and then agree on humanity, that kind of conversation brings me joy.
This is maybe a little bit more frivolous seeming, but it's been bringing me a ton of joy. Is I finally, after being told by countless people in my life that I have to read the book The Overstory by Richard Powers, I am finally reading it, and it is deserving and exceeding the hype. I'm about halfway through, and the way he's able to draw your attention to the real wonder that trees are, and do that in this narrative form where you're not being crashed over the head with it like this is edutainment or something. It's just so deft, and so there's such a joy in people who can wield their skill like that, but then do it in a way that feels like it's for a really meaningful cause, has just been really exciting me and giving me something to look forward to at the end of long days.
Beautiful.
I also wanted to pick up on a couple of things you both said before we get to the sort of proper conversation where we talk about the heavy stuff. One, Hani, thinking about kids, one thing that's really become pronounced to me, and unfortunately I have to thank algorithmic social media for this, is there's this sense among people who think, oh, we shouldn't be talking about being gay, like kids can't understand it. And there's been this real pushback that I've been really excited to see of like, no, kids can totally understand this. It's actually much easier for kids to understand this because there's no fixity in what the world's supposed to be. It's only when we introduce those ideas about the way the world's supposed to be that they then start to sort of calcify in certain ideas. And then, of course, Katie will, at some point later in the conversation, have to talk a little bit about
we must.
Hot Chef.
I'd be delighted.
But before we do that, I'd love if you could, for folks who maybe aren't familiar, talk about what Superhumanizer is, what your goals with Superhumanizer is, and weave into that somehow how you met and formulated the idea to create this container for these conversations.
Honey, baby, this is all you. You got to start us
Okay.
off.
Thank you. I love this question, and we get asked it a lot, which I absolutely love. It's like when people ask me and my husband, how'd you guys meet? And I feel like our love story, Katie, is so much the same in many ways. Um, Superhumanizer obviously started when October 7th happened 2 years ago. And that was one of the most difficult times of our life. Anybody that's plugged into the movement, this is definitely a very heavy time of grief. And when I left the Middle East, I came here as an immigrant. And at the time, which I kind of, I'm a little embarrassed to say now, but at the time, I felt like, I'm done with that world. I'm done with the third world. I'm here to be a big, loud, proud man, and just be who I am, and free speech, and, all the things that you move from the third world to the first world, from, the Arab world to the West, to come to, these values and ideals. And I told myself, I'm never going to look back. That's it. And then October 7th happened, and I just couldn't not be part of the solution for that place, because on one level, we all knew that probably the biggest destruction we've ever seen is going to come, because when you grow up there, which I've grown up there and I've been under Israeli airstrikes, you know that every time this happens again, it's only going to be worse than the time before. It never gets better. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so we all knew that what's coming is way worse. And I just couldn't sit there and pretend like I had let go of that place entirely, and that I'm not Lebanese and I'm not Palestinian and I'm just American now. And it wasn't matching in my heart. And so I thought, okay, what's the easiest thing that I could do right now that could potentially have an impact? Because I can't go there. I can't devote my life entirely to just being an activist right now. And so what's the smallest thing I could do that could make an impact? And I was talking to actually my Jewish sister here, who is my chosen sister, who before October 7th, we had never even talked about, my Palestinian heritage, her Jewish heritage, what Israel means to her, all those kind of things. And then that happened, and we had one of the most remarkable, challenging, there was tears, there was, oh my God, it's really hard for me to hear this from both ends, And through that conversation, she was actually the person that encouraged me to do the podcast. And then she sent me to a meditation circle in Malibu, where I got there, and there's obviously a lot of people that were in pain. There was Israelis there as well. There was Arabs, And so we're all meditating. And on the way back from that circle, the idea of Superhumanizer just came into my head. And I remember, as I was driving, buying the domain, and then just everything, came to me as what this should be. And then 3 episodes in, I met my Katie love, and it was love at first sight. And it's the most listened to, most watched episode still until today. We just had such a remarkable conversation. And I knew instantly in that conversation that something needs to happen. And so I asked Katie if she would be my co-host. And that was that. And I won't say any more, because the rest is up to you to tell, Katie, dearest.
Yeah, absolutely. God, honey, I love hearing you talk about the way that you created Superhumanizer and this brainchild of yours, which is so you. It is like your humanity distilled into a mission, and I'm just so grateful that I get to be a part of it. I came to this movement differently. I am the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and I was raised in an explicitly Zionist Jewish household in the northeastern United States. My family has moved between, I grew up going to an Orthodox Hasidic Chabad. My family was conservative Jewish when they were growing up. Now are more like Reform. I'm reconstructionist. So we're across the spectrum of Judaism. But in all of these spaces, Zionism was kind of presumed. And so I entered college really never having heard the word Palestine. I had no familiarity with the Palestinian liberation movement, but I studied comparative political science and had a lot of relevant coursework on the Middle East and the Arab world and the conflict as it was initially framed. And once you're in sort of the literature on the history of Palestine and the Nakba and 1967, 1973, especially if you have a context of political science education that can label colonization for what it is, that can label settler colonialism for what it is, apartheid for what it is, the vocabulary really begins to coalesce in a way that is unavoidably educational. And so within a few semesters of coursework, I knew that I supported Palestinian liberation and that Israel was, unfortunately and devastatingly for me, a settler colonial project that was based on this like ethno-nationalism and ethnic cleansing. And that was a challenging thing to come to terms with. And then I traveled to occupied Palestine when I was 19 and really saw the apartheid in real time. And that was the crystallization of my unlearning of Zionism and my sort of conversion from a Jew who was raised Zionist to an explicitly anti-Zionist and Zionist critical Jewish woman. And then I spent 10 years in this movement. Peripherally, I, obviously advocated for a free Palestine. I would be really alarmed every time Israel would ramp up its violent cleansing projects. I remember in 2021, in particular, with Sheikh Jarrah being devastated by the bombing campaigns and really frustrated with the response to things like the Palestinian March for Freedom. But I wasn't very vocal. I had other movements that I was more involved in. I'm a violence prevention scholar. I'm a rape prevention researcher and advocate. I had done a lot of work on sexual recovery post trauma for clients. Like that's my clinical work. And so I had all of these other justice spaces I was moving through. And then October 7th happened. And as Hani said before, like there was this bracing process for all of us who were tuned in to Israel's pattern of human rights abuse and cleansing project of this is going to be one of the worst experiences of human evil or witnessing experiences of human evil any of us have collectively seen. Like what is going to be allowed now to happen to Palestinians is terrifying, like very, very frightful. And so October 7th happened, and I think by October 8th or 9th, I started posting content of we have to keep eyes on Palestine because Israel has this horrific record of violent human rights abuses, and now they're going to be able to move forward with this unchecked. Netanyahu is a psychopath. Like, there is no excuse for what's about to happen. And so Hani and I connected really from that and from seeing each other's social media posts, drawing people's eyes to the humanitarian crisis that was occurring in Palestine and in Gaza in particular. And then I joined Hani on a podcast episode of Superhumanizer. And as he said, it was love at first sight. It was just magic. Like sometimes there's a moment where you meet someone and it's like red spring of fate, red spring of fate. Like we were supposed to find each other in every lifetime. And Hani was definitely one of those people for me. And it just clicked and felt like a way to be in this conversation and contribute without making it all about Jewish pain, without making it all about some white Western woman's perspective, without colonizing the conversation. And I'm saying this with a little ironic awareness of how long I've been talking. So I'm going to wrap it up and move us along. But that was really a big part of the mission too, of this work is listening as much as it is speaking. It is learning as much as it is educating. And Hani created, I think, the perfect context and catalyst for that. And I'm just honored to be a part of it. So,
So I have follow-up questions for each of you related to stuff that you brought up. But right before we get there, I'd love if you could, obviously the episode between the two of you must be your favorite given that you work together. But
Yes.
outside of that one, if you could call out a couple of the conversations that really stand out in your mind, like if somebody's watching or listening to this and they're like, oh, where do I get started? Where would you recommend?
Oh my God.
I mean, so many of them leap to mind, but I think the two that I'm sticking with right now are Reverend Munther Isaac. I think about that conversation all the time. And then for people who need a 101, Ilan Pape is a great 101. I'd say like a brief episode of like, this is what you have to know about the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That's a great consciousness raising episode.
Yes, I do. Those are definitely two of the most profound episodes, even for me, just like being in their presence and asking them questions and understanding the 101 of the ethnic cleansing, which really nobody had documented before Ilan Pape, and even for me reading it and having that historian tell the story of my family and what happened to them that doesn't exist anywhere else. I think that that is such an important conversation. And the 101, of course, of like living in the West Bank, and Dr. Munder Isaac is like the one of the most respected figures of Christianity that comes out of Palestine. And so that was really a profound conversation. I really love Hadar Cohen's episode. That episode, I was in the background watching them do the episode, watching Katie interview her, and I was watching it and I was like, oh my God, this episode is going to be one of the most watched and listened to. And it is. It's in our top 3. It's amazing. And for me, learning about the intersection between Judaism and Arabs, I had really not known a lot about that history. You don't just like learn about that as you're growing up in the Arab world. And that episode made it into the top charts in the Arab world. So I think a lot of Arabs learned a lot about our Jewish history, which I think was really important and screams Superhumanizer and why we did it. And I have to also highlight the very first episode with Mara Cronenfeld, who is UNRWA USA Executive Director. And I feel like because, your first episode is never going to be your most listened to or watched episode. And I really feel like we need to bring Mara back because so much has happened since that first episode and what UNRWA does. But especially now with the attacks on every single structure that is supposed to uphold some level of law or humanity in the world. UNRWA is one that has come under so much attack, and I wouldn't be a doctor here today in the US if it wasn't for UNRWA helping my dad raise his level of life from the refugee camps. He was living in the Palestinian refugee camps, and UNRWA armed him to become an engineer, where he gave us a middle-class life. I never knew poverty, I never knew refugee camps, and then invested in me becoming a doctor. So something like UNRWA has a much larger impact than most people understand. And even if you listen to the episode today, you will still understand how much UNRWA used to do. And the tragic part is that since then, UNRWA has been crippled. And so all that amazing work that would happen in that episode, a lot of that has been crippled by the politics of today. So even though it's maybe an outdated episode, it's such an important one to understand what we had. Because if UNRWA is taken away today, there might never, ever be an organization that can do a quarter of what UNRWA used to do for decades for a large number of people. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for answering it so beautifully. And I hope folks take your lead and go watch or listen. And now I want to go back to where you had both kind of led us, which is I want to talk about, you obviously have very different life experiences that brought you to this work. And I want to spend a little bit more time with each of you on that experience, because I think these first person POVs sometimes take us out of the realm of talking about sort of abstract statistics and news headlines. I also want to sort of flag that I'm going to attempt to do this as sensitively as I possibly can. And so don't feel any pressure to talk about anything you don't want to talk about. Hani, I think I'd like to start with you. So you're of Lebanese and Palestinian heritage. I think the opening question that I'd love to go deeper on that you've referenced in that example about UNRWA is, what are the first person challenges you faced both in your life there, but then also in immigrating to the United States? And these can be structural challenges, these can be personal challenges, just the broad range, to give folks a sense more of your journey and sort of evolution in this work.
Well, thank you for that question. So I think my life has been riddled with challenges, which has made me who I am today, and I'm grateful for them. But where does one even begin? I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. So I think, that in itself is a bunch of challenges. It was not the open place it is today. Today, Saudi Arabia has made a complete 180. Good for them. I'm so happy for them. However, when I was growing up there, it was normal for me to be bullied, as a more effeminate man, or to be bullied as like a Lebanese in Saudi Arabia because Lebanese people are, considered more effeminate than the rest of the Arab world. So automatically you're made fun of as a Lebanese person. And then I would like normally see my mom get bullied by the religious police, which doesn't exist today. They abolished them, thank God. But my mom would get bullied. We'd be in the mall walking. I'm like 7, 8 years old. And then this man just comes and starts like verbally harassing my mom because her bangs are showing, under the hijab. My mom doesn't wear hijab. So like for her to even wear hijab was also another level of me understanding my mom being oppressed or repressed in some way. Not to say hijab is oppressive, but when it's not chosen by you, it's imposed on you. And so that was a normal part of living in Saudi Arabia, and then moved to Lebanon when I was 16. And from the get-go, there was airstrikes and war, and I was growing up in Saudi Arabia because of a civil war in Lebanon. That was a safer place for my dad to have his family, and then we go back to Lebanon and it's like the same scenario with a different country, or now it's like 2 different groups that are fighting each other. It's just every summer there's something happening in Lebanon. And so those were challenges I experienced. And then of course, like being in medical school there and experiencing again, like wanting to be a prouder gay man in my country, but then you can't. You can be proud up to a certain extent, and then you just can't. You can't hold your husband's hand. You can't do anything. And so that was another level of challenge and repression I went through. And in many ways, all of that was why I wanted to get out. So I came here, finally, made it into the first world. Yay, amazing. However, I landed in West Virginia, which is the third world. And the first world, I know why you're laughing, Jesse. It's a beautiful place. I really enjoyed learning as a doctor there. It's like the sickest people in America are in West Virginia because it has the highest rate of heart disease, highest rates of addiction. So as a doctor, you get really robust. You learn. I'm a great doctor because of my training in West Virginia. And that was great. And then I moved to California. And again, it was like that trajectory towards having more and more freedom. So I moved to California because to me, it's like the epitome of freedom in the US, one of several safe haven states. And then in the last 2 years, I felt like a complete undoing of all of that because right now it's really hard for me to travel. I'm scared of traveling outside of the US. So I'm keeping myself in the US for the foreseeable future until I feel safe again. So I'm here and I don't feel safe again. And not because I'm a gay man, but because I'm an Arab with Lebanese and Palestinian heritage, and because I'm practicing my right of free speech to have a podcast and to have these conversations and to do all the things, that you're also doing, Jesse. And it's a scary time. So right now I'm challenged in upholding the mission that I've come here with, that has come out of the challenges of my life. And I'm hoping that there is, free speech at the end of this. There is America. There is the ideals of why I came here. And altogether, even let's say if I get kicked out of this country one day, I will still feel grateful for the challenges of going through this, because it will only make me feel like I want to protect the right of free speech and human rights even more. And today I'm in a better position to weather something like that. And so I'm grateful for even like being in this place where I can weather a challenge like that, and it can only fuel me to do more.
Thank you for that. Kind of flipping to the other side of the coin, Katie, you referenced growing up in a Zionist household and amid Zionist circles. And, I've seen things you've posted online where you get the very time-tested self-hating Jew accusation with a high degree of frequency, let's say. So I'd love to hear from you, like in doing this work, same question. What are the challenges you've faced in doing this work from this other side of the coin?
Yeah, well, I'll start with a declaration. Just I love my Judaism so much. I love being a Jewish woman. And for me, it's intrinsically tied to my childhood and this sort of nebulousness of parentage, there's a lot of conflict, particularly in Jewish activist spaces, about delegitimizing patrilineal Jews, so people who are Jewish because their father is Jewish. But I was raised by a single dad. My mother was unwell when I was growing up. She spent a lot of my life incarcerated and herself being sort of violated by systems. So my early education in the way that um, systems of harm can, intervene even with parenting and make it hard to like form a family, was really foundational to my justice orientation of like, I know my mom would show up for me as a parent if she were able. She does not have the resources to do that. That is because of the way that the state treats sick people. I'm now growing up with one parent who is a Jewish dad. And so, even though when my mom was around, my sisters and I went to church with her, by the time we were seven, I was seven, my dad had full custody, and we were living with his parents who maintained a Jewish household, a really Zionist Jewish household. And so, I was living in a house with three Jewish adults full time, my dad and his two parents. And then my dad's siblings also had bedrooms in this house. And so my like Jewish aunties and uncle would be coming home for family meals and for Shabbat and for Passover, and we'd celebrate Hanukkah together and Rosh Hashanah. And I was raised with this like foundational Jewish culture and education, while at the same time getting the message from the broader Jewish community that patrilineal Jews don't count. And the reason I name this is because when my activism comes under fire online, one of the messages I'll get over and over again is like, oh, well, her mother isn't Jewish, so she doesn't get to speak to this. And it's like, I was raised in a Jewish context. Patrilineal Jews are Jews, period. It's not like Hitler was going to say, oh, it was just one of your parents. Like, never mind, we'll keep you safe. It's just, it's a mentality that doesn't really make any sense to me. But I grew up in this zone um, that to me intrinsically tied my Judaism to my safety. If I had one safe parent, I had one present parent, I had one safe household, one safe context, and it was the Jewish household and the Jewish context. And I'm so grateful that I had that. And I think to come of age as a young Jewish adult and then learn about Palestine is a very particular kind of cultural and institutional betrayal of having to contend with the fact that, like, your elders deceived you, your rabbi deceived you, potentially one of your parents deceived you, your fellows and peers in this community deceived you, and maybe not on purpose. And this is the thing that's so challenging to communicate to people is like, since 1948, since the Nakba, since the initial waves of Aliyah, even in this foundation of Zionism into Jewish life, there has been a really concerted effort by Jewish institutions to brainwash and propagandize Jews into believing that Zionism and Judaism are inextricably linked. And that political effort has affected us all the way down, from leadership down through our communities. And fighting against it is fighting this enormous tide, and necessitates this very fine unweaving. It's like a particular and nuanced work. And so part of me claiming my Judaism is acknowledging that Jews are people who question, that being interrogative is like intrinsic to my culture. And I now have to contribute to this interrogation, in like a community oriented way, which means asking how tikkun olam, or this idea of healing the world, aligns or doesn't with Israeli perpetrated violence. It means bringing up the question of, Judaism has existed in a calendared system for almost 6,000 years. Israel as a state was created 77 years ago. What makes us think that Judaism is inherently tied to a nation state that was politically oriented, as opposed to just being able to persist for literal millennia? Um, it's asking questions like, foundational to Judaism is this idea of the righteous, where there are 36 people on this world, on the earth, that are supposed to prove to God humanity's right to exist. They're supposed to be righteous enough that they demonstrate to God that human beings should even be here. And your role as a Jewish adult is to try to embody the righteous. And and can we seriously look at the state of Israel and the Israeli occupation force and say any one of those people is one of the 36 righteous? And if not, how hard is that breaking from the culture that we've been sort of taught and raised within? So I have this like defensiveness over my patrilineal Judaism and the ability to say, I love my Judaism so much. I love how it shaped me. I love the safety that it's given me. I love the lessons that it's imparted in the face of the fake Jew allegations. Also, sorry, you can probably hear my cat playing with one of the toys. In the face of the fake Jew allegations, in the face of the not a real Jew allegations, of the you're a Western Jew, so your perspective doesn't really count. You've never faced the kind of violent anti-Semitism that people in occupied Palestine have, so your Judaism doesn't really count. Like there isn't risk of synagogues being shot up in the United States. Like one of my family's synagogues is the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. That's where both of my cousins were bat mitzvahed. Like there are real threats to Jewish safety from the alt-right and home soil. And so when I get those accusations that my Judaism is illegitimate, I find myself with this urge to like raise all of the cards and be like, no, look, I have this, 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 I have this. And it's such a losing battle. And I think from the narrative that I've pieced together in this movement, I know what my Judaism means to me. I know the lessons that were imparted to me in childhood. I can see very clearly in front of my face that the sort of human rights violations and brutality that Israel perpetrates contravenes everything I have been instructed about how to be a Jewish adult. And I trust other Jewish adults who have taken in the lessons of our Judaism to also be critical and to also start participating in that unweaving process in our community fabric of like, we need to take apart these things that have tangled us and harmed us morally and contributed to this moral injury, and rebuild a Judaism that is more legitimate. Because I would say that people who can point a gun at a child are fake Jews. I would say that people who can excuse the use of mass graves are fake Jews. I would say the people who can justify tanks rolling over folks who are still alive are fake Jews. We can all point fingers at each other all day, but I feel very, very grounded in sort of my moral aptitude in that conversation, and really alarmed, I think, by how shallow the critique is of people who want to say I'm not a real Jew. That was a very long answer to your question. But
No, that was beautiful. Thank you both.
yeah.
Yeah, there's one thing. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I'm no longer Catholic. But one thing that I've really run up against in knowing that faith quite well are these zones where people are acting hypocritically, to say it bluntly, where turn the other cheek is one of the sort of main adages, or blessed are the meek. Like you have these ideas that should be core doctrine, and I feel comfortable and versed in levying that critique, in a good faith conversation with a Christian if it comes to it. I feel less comfortable using the texts of faith that I didn't grow up in. But you brought up Tikkun Olam, and that's been one thing that's been really hard for me to witness. Is I love that idea. I think it's such a beautiful premise that I wish every religion put forward. And there have been things that I've just witnessed that I just don't know how you fit that. It's a square peg in a round hole type of thing, where it's like, in what way is this repairing the world? There's a thing here that's both drawing from your individual experiences and like a broader consideration, and it's a little bit messy. So I'm going to work my way through the question, and hopefully it makes sense at the end. But I'm thinking about the ways that the accusations of anti-Semitism, leave aside the sort of bad faith and the kind of nationalism and mob mentality that is maybe sort of driving certain people, but I'd say the good faith critique among particularly American Jews, but Jews worldwide, around anti-Semitism comes from a place of fear and insecurity. Of, this is the one place on earth that we're meant to be safe, and there's essentially no cost too high to protect it. Then there's also this aspect, and this is particularly directed at you, Hani, but it applies to both of you, of your interests in empathy and well-being and mental health. And your respective angles in on that conversation, and Hani, your sort of medical expertise in that subject. And so I'm just thinking about how, like, what lives inside that tension where we're thinking about this maybe misinformed but good faith concern that if Israel doesn't exist, that not American Jews, that Jews worldwide no longer have this safe haven after millennia of persecution. And then this consideration that well-being and, you know, the desire to live a good life is true to everyone. And so I see some threads there, but I'm maybe just going to like leave it there for a moment to get your responses, both of you, on, because I'm curious to hear how you're thinking about those kind of entangled topics.
I love what you said about like the tensions there, because at the end of the day, nothing is ever black or white. And we tend to really go to that like black or white place about things. And especially now, there's more healing in understanding that tension and being able to even be a container for that tension so that people can come out feeling the release of the humanity of resolving that tension. Because at the end of the day, what resolves that is the humanity. And as you were talking, Jesse and Katie, like as you guys were both like kind of reflecting on anti-Semitism, I remembered that like one of my challenges through the last 2 years has been also being called an anti-Semite, even though Katie is my co-host and like 3 of my best friends are Jews, you know, and so it's and also I am genetically Jewish according to 23andMe. So it's like, okay, why are people saying that I'm an anti-Semite? Where is that coming from? And of course, if I wasn't trying to practice what I preach and be a better human, it would be natural and also so easy. It's the easier path for me to hate on these people that call me anti-Semite, like the people that called my boss to try and get me fired, right? Like I have a good reason to hate them. You know, I have a good reason to hate the descendants of the people that wiped out an entire arm of my family, just like you do, Katie, right? Like, so there's legitimate reasons to hate, and there's legitimate reasons to lose empathy and compassion. But when I think about why they're calling me an anti-Semite, it goes back to that basic need of safety. We all need safety. I left my country because I wanted more safety. The Jews left Europe because they wanted more safety when they came to Palestine. And the Palestinians are fighting to have their safety. So at the end of the day, if you trace back these tensions, they come back to some form of basic need. And in this particular case, that basic need is safety, it's humanity, it's seeing your lineage, seeing your grandchildren, you know. And so when we're holding that tension, if we're going to come from a place of compassion and understanding and be part of the solution, then we have to understand where these people are coming from and how do we come back to a conversation about safety. And when I think about, like recently we interviewed Mohsen Mahdawi, it's still not out, the episode, but it was such a good conversation. And for the people that don't know who Mohsen is, he is a wonderful Palestinian Buddhist, Columbia University graduate, a leader who was also detained by ICE in his naturalization interview. And he talks about the conversations that he had with Israelis and how in the Columbia encampments, which he was a big part of organizing, he actually focused on bridge building and conversations and talking with Israelis about his pain. And so when he was able to talk with the person on the other side who also had pain, who also had fears of safety, and share with them that his best friend was killed in front of him, that his uncle and 3 of his cousins have been killed since October 7th, and you know, the list of woes and pains continues, and how at the end of the day, he wants the same thing that they want, which is safety. Then the connect happens. Then they are the ones that are protesting outside the courthouses so he's not detained again by ICE. Then he's getting awards from some of the biggest Jewish societies in America because now he is part of the solution. And that's what I see as the future of all of this. Definitely the future of all of this is not the people that are attacking me and Katie. And it's not the people that are boasting about the crimes that they're doing and the Telegram channels and all that stuff. Those are not the 36 righteous people, that's for sure. The righteous are the ones that are reaching across and wanting to have these conversations.
Yeah, honey, I so love what you say too about the sort of violence of that black and white thinking. Um, I get the question, well, I get these comments all the time of like, you have no idea what we go through in Israel. You're so safe and privileged living in the United States. And I'm like, let's sit with that tension, that cognitive dissonance for 1 second. Is Israel the only safe place in the world for Jews? Or am I so safe and privileged living in the United States that I can't relate to risk for violence? Something is undone right there. Like something is demystified right there. And I think those sorts of conversations are vital. And when we lean into black or white thinking, the nuance of shared experience is entirely erased. I am concerned about anti Semitism in the United States. I am concerned with the rise of rhetoric of people saying things like Hitler was right because of the actions of the state of Israel. I can be worried for my Jewish community. I can be worried about shootings at synagogues and stabbings and the sorts of violence that are threatened against Jewish people. And I can recognize that that grade of violence, that scale of violence, doesn't compare to the violence that Palestinians are facing in Palestine and Gaza and the West Bank right now. They're not comparable. Oppression Olympics helps no one. I can be worried about this thing. I can recognize that this gradation of violence is more severe and at the moment a political priority. Like we need to address this kind of violence. I can name in the movement that because of the pain over this kind of violence, because of the rage and the hurt of watching Palestinians undergo an active brutal genocide for the last 2 years and a drip genocide culturally and violently for the last 75 years, that there is anger in addressing this violence at all. And that anger leads to more sort of low grade anti Semitic language of like, oh, we can see why the Jews have been exiled for millennia. Like, this is what they do. They're so fucked up. And so we see that kind of the anti Semitic language that contributes to this violence makes its way into the movement because of the hurt and pain that's being experienced right now. There are layers to this, and we can address all of them. Like, it is earnest and just and righteous and moral to name that these things are happening simultaneously. We can also name that the angst over the language being used in the movement is not as much of a priority as ending an active genocide. And so acknowledging it is important, but we don't have to spend all of our time policing each other's language. We can say like, that's maybe not an ideal way to frame things. Like we have to cognitively split Zionism and Judaism in our minds. Like this political movement is very different than this marginalized group of people, and then move forward. And I think when we sit in black and white thinking and cognitions, all of that gets lost. And so one of the tools that I've found really useful is relying on some of the worksheets actually through cognitive behavioral therapy, and in particular, a trauma-focused treatment called cognitive processing therapy, which builds a foundational knowledge of how to recognize maladaptive cognitions. So those are thoughts or interpretations that hurt your feelings, that make you behave in ways that don't align with your values. Interrupting those maladaptive or problematic cognitions, acknowledging how they're making you feel, and replacing them with alternative thoughts. That's like the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy. But one of the worksheets of CPT that I find so useful, so cognitive processing therapy that I find so useful, is the patterns of problematic thinking worksheet of like, you find a thought that's really bothering you and then say, is this all or nothing thinking? Is this black and white? Is it exaggerating or minimizing? Is it generalizing? Like, what am I doing here that is warping how I see the world? And part of that layering nuance process is really unpacking when our interpretation of events is just not grounded in reality. So that's a tool I would say I would recommend to your listeners.
Yeah, I wanna stay loosely in this zone, because one thing that you said, Katie, like kicked this thought back up, which I have often, is the paralleling or the whataboutism of what Hamas did on October 7th. That, you know, this was the 9/11 times 10 for Israel, and that is the justification for, you know, this genocide that's being conducted against a largely civilian population. And a seeming inability among a lot of people to recognize that it's not like a math problem where you need to have like equivalent variables on either side. To leave aside the historical reasons why October 7th happened, like to not even get into that, but simply to say that just because this event happened doesn't mean that, you know, conducting a genocide largely on civilians is the right course of action. But it strikes me that that is a sort of fear-based maladaptive cognitive adaptation, that like it's now there's this boogeyman of Hamas everywhere. There's the human shields argument. There's this, you know, they use kids, they use hospitals. And so it becomes this easy way to say, well, we just have to carry out this genocide because otherwise we're unsafe again. And so like that was, you saying that was a really helpful kind of container idea for me to think through that paralleling. I'm hesitant to sort of like, I don't want to get into too much like solutions language, because obviously these like leave aside, like I don't want to fall into the trap of saying it's complex, but literally it is complex. So I'm not wanting to say that there's like easy hand wave magic wand solutions. However, I want to stay on this thread a little bit more because you host these really thoughtful, complex conversations with people who have a very specific angle in on this. And I'm wondering if in the course of doing that, in the course of your own individual works, are there other responses like that or other resources like that that you're encountering that you think are helpful in countering some of the maybe un or non-conscious ways that these harms are ultimately being greenlit with? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I'm thinking about conversations I have with my family, and in particular the older generation of my family who really do experience nervous system activation when they talk about October 7th or when they talk about the risks to Jews, the dismantling of Israel. It brings up like an embodied Holocaust trauma for them, and I can see their faces become red, their hands begin to shake, or they're like balling their hands into fists, or their voices are being raised, and it's like so clearly a physiologic response to threat activation, like there is something happening in the body. And so in order to engage in the sort of solutions oriented dialogue that you're even introducing, like in order for that dialogue to be possible, nervous system regulation has to be made accessible. And so like a five senses check-in or a grounding or reminding people you're in conversation with of like, I know this conversation feels risky, but we are just sitting here having a conversation. Like, you are not at risk right now. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not at risk right now. I know you're not going to hurt me. Like, the dialogue might be painful, but neither of us are being chased by a lion. um, and that allows the sort of co-regulation necessary to engage in conversation. And then I think some of the rhetorical tools that I found really useful have come from the ODS initiative or the One Democratic State initiative. It's a Palestinian led organization and initiative that creates discourse points around democracy in occupied Palestine and what a truly democratic state would look like a single secular state that includes Palestinians and Jews. And I think that is an ideal of the Western world that people can really relate to and resonate with, this idea of freedom of speech and liberty and democratization and voting and representation and economic prosperity and economic mobility, the sort of erasure of social class. Like, it's a tangible way of making the conversation about equity. And they have I think political discourse and talking points that are so useful. So I'd say as an interpersonal strategy, co-regulation and like nervous system acknowledgement of like, we're actually both safe right now, even though this conversation is painful. Like, let's stay in the acknowledgement that right now we are safe talking about this. And then for more rhetorical tools, the ODS initiative.
Those are great, Katie. I think about when I'm thinking about like kind of tying this back to our beginning of our conversation about like children and parents and how we all just want the same thing, safety, and are seeing our kids grow up and all of that, you know, we all are engaged as good parents in breaking the cycle of things. And I'm right now finishing a Child and Adolescent Psychiatry fellowship, so I've been really diving deep into child psychiatry, seeing a lot of kids in my clinic, you know, and being engaged in these conversations of breaking the cycle, you know, just because my dad used, or my dad doesn't, but just because somebody's dad used to beat them up, it doesn't make it okay for them to beat up their children, right? Like we break the cycle because we want to do better for our children. And when we think of genocide and cycles and patterns, we're humans, we're all about patterns. And Katie, you said it so beautifully with the CPT work and all of that. It's about breaking the patterns that we're in. We all have cognitive dysfunctions and maladaptations and beliefs and things that it's our job to undo. It's not somebody else's job to undo. And somehow when we are parents, we anchor into that love of our kids that makes it so easy for us to undo so many of these things. And actually, it's like a therapeutic tool. It's like if this was your kid that's going through this, what would you say to yourself, right? Because it's so much easier to tap into compassion for your child, even when you're reflecting about your own stuff. And so genocide also has patterns, and there's a lot of science on this. And something I've learned through the interviews of the podcast and just being in this space for 2 years, there's a lot of science on what leads to genocide. What are the patterns? What are the thought processes? What is the cognitive dysfunction? All that, right? That leads to genocide. And every single genocide has common features. You can describe the stages of genocide and what leads to it and all that. And we are now in a tension, in a conversation where often the justification is, well, you know, this happened to the Jewish people, so of course they're gonna have to fight for themselves. And one day there's gonna be a Palestinian state, and it's gonna be, let's say, I don't know, worst case scenario, they're gonna be fighting each other again. We're gonna say it's okay because Israelis did this to the Palestinians, like they deserve this. Like, so when does this cycle end? And how do we, as we are parents and individuals, and the same intention of us doing better for our kids and our basic needs, like how do we bring that into the conversation of genocide and all the things that we're seeing repeat themselves? And so for me, I feel like if we can have conversations that allow people to see when they are participating in the pattern and the cycle of this pattern again, like what is the conversation you're having? Is it fueling that, yes, there should be more violence, yes, there should be more killing because of whatever noble cause you think that's going to lead to? Is that the conversation you're having? Or is it a conversation that's about all of us seeing our kids grow up, all of us having a future? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to lead us there. And so when I'm like sitting in spaces with my friends who are Zionists, some of them are not my friends anymore, or when I'm protesting, or when I'm engaging in a very heated comments chat on social media, I think of that. I think of what am I fueling in how I'm showing up in the world. And to me, I think like that is something that we're all responsible for. And the flip side of that is a lot of people feel like they're not responsible for this. Like they're, you know, you're in America and like you're in rural America somewhere, you know, and you're just like wanting to tend to your ranch or whatever it is, right? Like you're not connected to this. You know, a lot of people just want to put their head in the sand and you know, not be related to this in some way. And if you look at genocide, actually, one of the biggest reasons that genocide happens is because of the people that didn't do anything. The people that on some level even normalized it through silence and not participating, they were even bigger perpetrators than the people that were trying, you know, than the people that were actually conducting the genocide, you can say, because they weren't standing up for the people that were victims of those genocides. And so it's our responsibility not just to know how to engage and show up in these spaces, it's also our responsibility to say something, to uphold a value, even if it's just a conversation we're having with each other.
Yeah,
Mm,
honey, I want to follow up on that too, because as you've been talking, I keep thinking about this foundational moral plane of like, if you're in conversation with someone, you need to be able to say, like, I do not want you to suffer and die, and you do not want me to suffer and die. And if you find yourself in a conversation or a discourse with someone who cannot say, I don't want you to suffer and die,
The end.
that is such a well, the end, but also like I think it wakes people up to their own damage, like to whatever is going. If they have to say to another person, like, I actually don't care if you die. I actually don't care if they all die. It's like, hold on a second. What did you just say? Like, what just came out of your mouth? I need you to like be in your body right now with what you just said. And like, are you so numbed out that that doesn't feel like anything? Are you so angry that like you are speaking from a place of like fire and that's motivating the conversation, which is obviously not a productive place to be at? Are you at a place of grief? Like, what is happening in you that that actually just came out of your mouth? And I have found in really heated conversations where if we're able to come to the place of I don't want you to suffer and die, you don't want me to suffer and die, let's figure out how we don't
Yeah.
do that now. Like, how do we move forward so that neither of us are suffering and dying? Great. And otherwise, if like a lot of people do want to say like, oh, if there's this reaction of like, well, that like I don't care, actually I don't care if they suffer, I don't care if they die, there's an urgency to get out of the conversation, and I understand that urgency, and I think in many cases like that person is not discourse ready. But there's also an invitational opportunity there of like, you just said something that is so disconnected from a value system, so disconnected from morality, from humanity, from yourself. Like you just said something that violates like any human or social contract, and you're not a sociopath, like you're not a psychopath. So how did that happen? um yeah, how did that happen, I think is an interesting conversation point, even for the people who seem most resistant and
Yeah.
most
Can I
reticent.
add one more thing to that? I won't take up too much space. But as you were talking, Katie, I thought,
take as much as you want.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. But I think about like, one, the people that are listening to your podcast, Jesse, are definitely people that are here for like an urgent future, right? They feel the urgency of the future that we should have together. And so if somebody's listening and they're listening to Katie and they're thinking, yeah, I'm one of those people, like they did that and they deserve it. And of course, like, I don't care what you're saying, like kumbaya, whatever, right? Like there's a lot of people that are there, and I get that. If you are there, I think you should listen to two episodes where we interviewed Maoz Inan, who is a saint of a human being. Katie interviewed him. And he is somebody who lost a parent on October 7th. And he is somebody who, sorry, it was another date, Katie?
No, it was, I think, both parents. I think he lost his
Both
parents.
parents. Okay. Which is even worse. And so he has a very legitimate reason to hate and say all the things, right? Like they all deserve it, whatever. However, he has chosen the path of peace, and he is somebody who is engaged in peace-oriented entrepreneurship. And he's somebody who got recognized by the Pope standing next to a Palestinian man because they want to be part of the solution, a Palestinian man who also lost a family member. And so listen to that episode, listen to somebody who has a very legitimate reason to hate and to say, yes, kill them all, and is instead choosing the path of peace and his reasons for why. You can't help but fall in love with an Israeli person if you have an allergy to Israeli people right now, which is also valid, right? Like you listen to Maoz Inan and he restores your faith in humanity, and he restores your faith that there are 36 people in Israel that could be righteous. He is one of them. And then the other episode that I would highlight is Isa Amro, who is somebody who is right now nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and he is considered the Gandhi of Palestine. And when you listen to his story of how he grows up in the West Bank, and if you just like follow his Instagram, literally every week there's terrorist settlers coming to his house, terrorizing him. He had to go to like a whole other place 3 hours away that usually if you were to take a car and drive there, it's like 20 minutes away, but he had to go through a circuitous route of 3 hours through checkpoints and different things where he was harassed on the way and witnessed harassment to do the episode with me. And his whole discourse is about, I love the Jews. I want to work with the Jews. And he has people in Palestine attacking him who are Palestinians because of his peace activism. And so he has a legitimate reason to hate as well. But he's not choosing that. And so if you are people that are listening to our episode right now and you are polarized on one side or the other, I'd highly recommend at least just listen to the peacemakers and see what they have to say, especially those people that have lost a lot. If they can do it, then what is our excuse for not doing it?
Amazing. And just to build on, like, I so appreciate the call out, not to the listenership sort of in totality, but there is, I called it Urgent Futures for a reason. To name a quick example, research produced this summer found that we are on track for a world that is 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2050. Now, most life can't survive at 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So we're talking about, we have a 25-year window to do something monumental at a scale that we've never done as a species before. And so there's definitely a lot of that in my show. But of course, process is product. And so, and the weird paradox of the polycrisis is that it's actually all one thing. It's all this one system of domination that's symptomatically expressing in these different ways, which is why I feel so lucky to be able to talk to you both. And I feel like I'm learning so much in this conversation, even beyond what I've learned listening to Superhumanizer, where, none of us are free until all of us are free. And I've had feedback. I do have Israeli listeners and I have Jewish American listeners who are sympathetic to Israel's aims. And when I've discussed Gaza and Palestine in the past, they've let me know their displeasure. But it feels very important, even as it's sort of the bio Kamalafe thing of the times are urgent, let us slow down. So this very much feels in keeping with the type of conversations that I like to have on this channel. This feels very standout even in really showing that, like, yeah, we got to move fast, but we have to move fast macro by moving slow micro.
Well said.
And so everything you're saying is really living into that. I have one more kind of little bucket, not a bucket, but I have one more little topic related to this, and then we'll get to lighter things. I know that we've spent some time in some heavy places, and I appreciate you both going there with me. There's this other dimension to this of your social media presences and how you show up there in advocating for Palestinian liberation. And this is a thorny question because, of course, we can all look around and see how social media becomes very toxic very quickly. And there's a lot of big question marks around, is participation on social media ultimately creating good, even if, the content itself that we're producing feels good. So I wanted to get you, both of your takes on what you see as your responsibilities as people with platforms. What's the type of content you try to share? How do you try to position that content? Like, what are all those decisions that you're taking with your platform, particularly when sharing stuff that by nature is so many of the things I've seen from both of you have that Instagram kind of like front thing saying, like, you probably don't want to see this, traumatic imagery, and you have to click see why, and then you have to click I still want to see it. Not everybody's up to the task of sharing that type of stuff. So yeah, I wanted to get kind of your sense of how you're approaching that responsibility. Whoever wants to jump in, take it away.
Ladies first.
It has been a learning process, I think. I would say my social media exercise is one of radical authenticity, even when people find it upsetting, even when people find it distasteful. And so I do talk about the genocide in Palestine and the way that the Israeli occupation force attempts to justify itself, and that there truly is no justification. And I would say, really loud about providing a model for Jewish people who are unlearning or interrogating their own Zionism and asking if they truly need a violent ethno-nationalist state to tell them that they are safe and Jewish, or if it should be the responsibility of all states, all neighbors, all communities, all people to say, I see that you're Jewish and also you're safe here. Because I think as soon as we give responsibility to one single state to do that, the game falls apart and all of a sudden Jewish people actually are at risk. So that's something I talk about really loudly. I think one of the valuable pieces of social media is modeling of if there's something violent that we have to unlearn, it helps to watch someone do it in real time. I'll also say one of the things that's gotten me a lot of pushback and frustration from people online is I'm also a sex researcher. I'm also a doctoral candidate in psychology. I'm also an author. I'm also kind of a silly girl. And I'm also a romantic. And I will bring all of those pieces of my experience to my presentation of the self. And I get a lot of pushback and a lot of anger from people saying, no, we followed you because of Palestine. Shut up about the rest of your life and only talk about Palestine. We followed you for your politics. Shut up about your boyfriend. We don't want to see you on vacation. We don't this is not what you're here for. Perform for us. And I'm like, I'm not going to fit into one box of what my personhood is. I will share my research that I think is a valuable contribution to intimate well-being, violence prevention, and sexual pleasure. I will share my experience of joy and grounding and how I am able to maintain myself in movements for justice and activism. You will see posts about my book and how excited I am about the book and how devastated I am about the human rights abuses that are happening in Gaza and the West Bank. You will have to if you follow me, you're going to have to train your mind as well to sit with that cognitive dissonance and to ask yourself, okay, what things did I just see back to back that made me uncomfortable? And it's an invitation to stay in humanity rather than disconnecting. And I think that's something that I hope to contribute to the social media sphere that's actually kind of hard to find, of people who are fully integrated and willing to take the pushback from those who find it distasteful or uncomfortable. And you're going to hear about my relationship, and you're going to see me rage against politicians, and you're going to see me have a little crush on Zohran Mamdani. All of those things are going to be on the page. And I think it gives people a human access point to activism, because so often we frame justice work of this has to be your entire life mission. If you take a rest, if you take a step back, if you have other parts of your life, you're not a real activist, you're not a pure activist, you're not actually in the movement, you don't actually care. And so you have to prove how devastated, angry, pissed off, grieving, etc. you are all the time, or your work doesn't count. No wonder people don't want to be fucking activists if that is what we're offering them. If we're offering them a life that is rage, misery, and the grind all the time, who would choose that? And so I'm trying to offer, yes, rage, misery, grind against the machine, take it down, stay in it. And being a full person is what's going to keep you in it. So that's I would say my social media experience in a nutshell. And it pisses people off. And I would say I'm sorry that it pisses people off, but I'm not. I think it's valuable for folks to sit with why that makes them angry.
Yeah, the rainbow that you are, Katie dearest, is why we all come to you and we keep coming back. I love how you show up
Thanks,
in
baby.
that space. It's made me show up in a more authentic way. And I love that you are a scholar of politics and geography and therapy, mental health. You're almost a PhD. You're almost there. You're a doctoral candidate, and at the same time, you just flip into talking about sports and hot chef and sex and your new book. And it's just such a beautiful celebration of who you are. And it cushions us coming to the causes that you represent, whether that's Palestine or just sexual health, right? You cushion that for us. Even I've read a lot of your reviews of your book. I've never read a smut book. You're going to be my first smut book that I ever read. And I am so excited because all the reviews are about how this wasn't just a smut book, it was a therapy book. And I know that was your intention, and how you wrote that book is to model these concepts of safety and consent and all these things that you bring from your clinic into this book. And that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. And I think of platforms in that way, Jesse. I know you're also somebody who's like, the way you're showing up in this world and this show and everything you're doing in your work is because you want to use your platform in a way that has meaning, and also in a way that celebrates all your talents and gifts. You're such a gifted host. You've held such a beautiful container for us today. And what a beautiful platform you created for us today to have this conversation. I hope people are listening to us and taking something positive, even though it was a difficult discussion on some level, back into their life. And I think that's what platforms are for, is for us to model and embody ourselves entirely and authentically, and also do it in a way that has meaning. Before October 7th, I had kind of taken a break from social media for a few years. I wasn't using it in a healthy way. Obviously I was one of the people that was doom scrolling and posting thirst traps all the time and all that stuff, right? Which we all do on social media because we're all human, and I realized that wasn't meaningful to me, and it wasn't fueling the right parts of me. And at some point I heard from friends and people that love me, and then I heard from myself that, this is not how to use this platform or be in this space. And then I became a doctor, and I started using my platform to talk more about health and wellness and all those things. And that brought me a lot of meaning, a lot of joy, and connected me to other people who are trying to do the same thing, just like we're connected, both of us right now. And that is also what platforms are for, is to connect us to other people that are showing up to do good in the world as well. And then obviously since October 7th and doing all that work, like the whole other community that opened up for me and Katie and you, Jesse, and just the work that we're doing together, I think that's what platforms are for. And if you're just showing up to social media to look at cat videos, which I'm certainly also doing, that's also fine. But the way that you participate in the comments, what you press like on, you're a consumer, what you press like on is going to show other people what you're also seeing. And so liking cat videos is great. Please keep doing that because I want that in my algorithm. But also participate in the way that you are a consumer on social media, and what you press like on and you share is also you contributing to a good cause somehow. So even if you don't want to create a podcast and be an activist like us, just how you are consuming social media is also a form of being present and being an activist in some way.
And I do want to name too one of the tangibles of social media, which is particularly the boycotts. I think one of the grandest tangibles of justice work is deciding where we spend our money, and watching when we refuse to give violent institutions money, what happens. And so the first step to mobilization is consciousness raising. Social media is a platform of consciousness raising. It facilitates on the ground mobilization. It connects people to protest movements. It tells them what they should boycott. It lets them know when an event is happening in their city to meet up in person. It gives people opportunities for in-person organization and the creation of community spaces. Like, there are the not on the internet consequences and benefits of social media use. And I think if people weren't organizing on social media for the boycotts of McDonald's or Starbucks or Spotify or any of these different platforms and companies that have been so detrimental to Palestinians and have really sort of upheld this genocide, then those companies would have had great quarters. But they didn't. They're closing locations, they're closing shops, they're losing millions or billions of dollars. And like, that consumer impact, Hani, as you were talking about, like, we are still consumers online, that consumer impact would not have been made possible without some of the organizing that happens online. So I would say if all of your activist work is behind a screen, I would ask yourself if that truly feels sufficient, and if that truly feels like a contribution, like check in with yourself. If the answer is no, get out at a protest, get out on the meet people, like do something, make a phone call, whatever it is. But I don't want to call this social media piece slacktivism, because I don't think that's an appropriate framing.
Amazing. Oof, so much stuff here. Wow. Well, we can kind of close that chapter. I have my recurring questions, which I'll get to. But before I do, Katie, I have to ask you, what is the latest with Hot Chef?
Yes, please.
He's so dreamy. He's
He
so
really is.
wonderful. So for folks who are just joining this story, Hot Chef is the internet nickname for my boyfriend. I met him in Paris this summer. He was cooking at a restaurant that I was eating at. I saw him in the alley outside of the restaurant. It was like love at first sight. I walked into his kitchen after my meal to give him my phone number. And we have essentially been together ever since. He's executive chef of the Frenchy hospitality group out in Paris, well, in France. And he's so great. I get to see him in a week. We talk on the phone almost every day. We are planning a life together. So I have to do clinical internship this coming summer through summer 2027. I have to do clinical work in the United States. But my plan for after that is 100% to move to France. My family is in the process of applying for Polish citizenship. So I will have an EU passport at that point, and will be able to relocate and become a European resident much more easily. So the update is that my boyfriend is perfect and dreamy and a great cook and so sexy, and I want to stare at him all the time and touch his beautiful face. And he's enormous and burly and tatted, and I'm obsessed with him. This man has made my life so much better. I cannot even tell you. For people who want to like stay up on the love story, I started posting about meeting him on Threads, literally like the day we met. I posted about him being like, I have a date with this man tomorrow. I'm so nervous. And so you can follow the Hot Chef tag on Threads, which has now been viewed millions of times. Like, this man became internet famous overnight, and he's a very private person. And here I am yapping about him. So, whoops. But he knows exactly how excited I am about him and loves me anyway, which is great. So that's the update.
No.
He's perfect. Yeah.
And yeah,
He's
honey,
so hot, you guys.
What's been your like kind of what's been your sort of perception and receiving of all of this as Katie's
Oh
friend
my
and
God.
co-host?
I have watched Katie navigate a few near misses. You know, in healthcare, there's the term near miss, where like you catch something before something bad happens. And I've watched her go through a few of those, but she emerges every time. Although, of course, like going through a breakup, separation is just gut-wrenching, you know, and to have to do that over and over again. But, you know, love is also about digging through a lot of dirt until you find a diamond. You know, the dating wheel, all that stuff. And so I watched kind of Katie go through the near misses and then land on Hot Chef. And I've never seen her happier or safer or more secure. And I just like, for me to watch somebody I love so much finally be in this space where they're happy and satisfied and they're actually being loved the way they deserve to be loved and celebrated in all their entirety and intensity and depth of feeling and love. And I think that's what we all deserve. And Katie finally has what she deserves. And there's nothing that brings me joy more than that.
Oh,
Thank you, baby.
I love that. All right. Well, as I said, this has been such an insightful conversation. So I just want to like honor everything we've talked about up to this point with a huge thank you to you both. I have these 3 questions that I like to close every conversation with. You've inevitably hit on them in some capacity, so feel free to call something back in you already talked about or take it a totally different direction. What is one thing you wish people paid more attention to? Hani, maybe I'll start with you since I started with Katie on what's bringing you joy.
For me, the thing that helped me the most when I started paying attention to it is being a good listener. that just transformed my life. I am an ADHDer. I tend to cut people off when I'm talking, or want to like, take the conversation a million places, or get really excited to like say my piece. I want to say my piece. I want to participate. Hi, I'm here, and I've had to learn to be a good listener. It wasn't something that came naturally to me. And when I did, and I'm still working on that, it's a lifelong process, and then you kind of not be a good listener, and then you remember to be a good listener again because you're paying attention to that. That transformed how I show up as a doctor, how I show up as a friend, how I show up as a podcast co-host, all the above. And I think listening, if we were all listening more today, it would be a completely different world. So I wish people paid more attention to listening.
Love that. Katie?
I wish people paid more attention to the body, like how it feels to exist in certain conversations, in certain relationships, in certain thought patterns, how it feels physically to exist in the gray rather than running to the immediate comfort and crystallization of that black and white. Even being furious can be a comfort space, right? Even being devastated can be a comfort space. Like allowing yourself to be in gray feels physiologically different than going to either of those poles. So I would say, yeah, paying attention to the body, understanding what brings you joy, like what brings you pleasure, what pleasure feels like in the body. How do you know that you're enjoying something? And paying attention to what makes you feel like shit. Like I remember when I first started unlearning Zionism, thinking about my Judaism and Israel, or my Judaism and Zionism in relation with each other, felt to me physically like being in an abusive relationship. It felt like being in a toxic relationship. My nervous system would be on guard. I would be like braced thinking about this. I was like angry. I felt betrayed, and it was like, tension in my shoulders, or noticing those clenched fists, or like grinding my teeth or clenching my jaw. And there's so much wisdom in the body in telling you this is what is good for you and this is what is not serving you. And I really wish people paid attention to the body. I think a lot of folks who currently identify as Zionists, I think a lot of folks who currently feel connected to the state of Israel, if they spent more time in the body, would notice how that relationship is making them feel.
So Hani, back to you. What is one resource you recommend for making better sense of reality?
Yeah, if I were to think of how I make sense of reality, again, like what I've learned maybe is useful to other people, is listening is sometimes really hard, especially if it's not something you want to hear. And we cannot make sense of the world and reality in a vacuum. It just doesn't exist. Like we have something called mirror neurons, which develop before self neurons, which means that I understand myself and my body and in the world through others before I understand myself alone. That's how I make sense of myself, is through mirroring through others. And when we are listening and having conversations and trying to make sense of the world, it's not just about listening to what feels good to us. Katie, you said about like, why would a Zionist feel like bad in their body if they're like listening to the ICJ ruling saying this is plausible genocide, right? Like, why are they feeling bad in their body? And so having conversations and listening to something that doesn't feel good to you is also part of making sense of the world. And that was certainly my experience as I learned more about Judaism and about Israel, and had to undo what I came here, from the Middle East with, that was conditioning, that helped me make more sense of what happened to my family and why that happened and all those things. Because if something bad happened, if we can make sense of it, it helps us digest it and it cushions it. And that's what leads to integration and healing. Just like In the clinic, we go through trauma and we come there to make sense of it. And sometimes when we're talking about trauma, we're not going to say things that feel good. And we're going to say things that might feel like they're not easy to see about ourselves or about how we showed up in that trauma or what may have led to as something we participated in that led to that trauma or whatever, like it's never an easy conversation. And so sense making is also about being in conversation and listening to views that aren't necessarily aligned with yours and to things that don't necessarily make you feel comfortable.
Katie?
This is a tool we wish people had. I just want to get the question.
Broadly meant.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the cognitive behavioral triangle because I think it's just not widely known enough and certainly underutilized. And the basic summary is some activating or triggering event happens. You interpret that event, so you have a thought. The way you interpret that event or the thought you have leads to an emotional experience if you feel something. And then the way that you feel triggers a behavior. And even just being able to identify the trajectory of that triangle of this activating event happened, I told myself this thing. So I saw the news about October 7th. I told myself that Jews will never be safe anywhere. I felt fear, rage, and grief. And it made me support, however Israel responded afterwards. Woof, that is a lot of awareness of pattern right in that triangle. Whereas, okay, October 7th happened. I tell myself when human beings are caged and brutalized and violated, they react in ways that are themselves violent, and that is a tragedy. And we should have compassion for any person held in a cage. I feel sad for all of the Israeli families that experienced loss and grief and fear on that day. And I feel devastated for the Palestinians in Gaza who have been held in violent open air prison and brutalized for 75 years. And it activates me to engage in this conversation in ways that humanize those groups and hopefully contribute to bridging. That's a very different triangle based on the interpretation and the thought. And if you notice your thoughts are making you feel like shit and behave in ways that misalign with your values, spend some time on your interpretation of events. How are you interpreting things? Because that's an inflection point and an intervention point that is very accessible for pretty much anyone who can engage in metacognition. If you can think about your thoughts, you can change the trajectory of that triangle.
Amazing. And finally, Hani, what is one moment when your sense of reality was disrupted?
The first thing that comes to mind is when I was 18 years old, or sometime around that age, when I was under Israeli airstrikes, and I was sitting with my older brother. I was working at Burger King during the summer before going to college, and I spent 2 days working at Burger King and absolutely hated it. And then one day I came home and I was hating on smelling like burgers and complaining. And then suddenly the huge explosion happens very close by at an electric factory, and all the electricity goes out. And I was stuck in the house with my brother and his girlfriend for about a week under airstrikes. And that week, the almost schizophrenia, the whiplash of going from hating on a Burger King job to being in the midst of war and trapped, that really disrupted my sense of reality. And I guess when I think of that moment and just feeling the horror of being disconnected from our parents, not being able to get there, speaking to our parents every day, sometimes 10 times a day, just to make sure we're safe, I think of that horror for every single people I see oppressed today, whether they were, in the kibbutzes as they were being attacked, right? Because whatever you say about October 7th and all the things, at the end of the day, there were people sitting in their homes being people, and then they were attacked. And then I think of the people on the other side of the border in Gaza and all the things that they have been going through for the last 2 years, and talking to all the people on the ground, and their disruption of reality. And I pray that just like my reality was restored by governments and people that were well-intentioned and people that understood there is a future and just being human and alive, I pray that that is going to be the restoration of reality for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Katie, take us home.
Yeah, the story's a little dark, so I want to give a trigger warning to your listeners. If conversations about sexual violence are not for you, maybe skip ahead. I'd say something that altered my understanding of reality is, and for people who follow me on social media, you'll know this story already. But when I was 15, I was sexually assaulted at my boarding school. And then when I reported, I was kicked out of school. And I didn't wait. It took me a really long time to process that experience and to understand what it did to my comprehension of a just world. Like this idea that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people is a myth. It is not based in reality. It's just a lesson that we're taught from childhood. And so this horrible thing happened to me when I was 15. I spent a long time thinking, okay, if this horrible thing happened to me, I must be a horrible person who deserves for horrible things to happen to her. And then over time and therapy and a lot of care, I got to unlearn both the just world myth and the like core belief of my own badness. And a decade later, when I was 25, I sued the school, won a very large legal settlement that has paid for the creation and publication of my new book.
Yes.
And it was just like, yeah, it was like an exquisite poetic justice moment. And I would say that was the second half of my transformation of reality of like, it is never too late to fight for justice. It is never too late to fight for yourself. It is never too late to like champion something that you know is important. Check in with your inner child and like your inner adolescent or whatever version of yourself is most hurt. Figure out what they need and fight for it right now. And I think a lot of people across movements for social justice would find that liberating. And also it'll help them understand what brought them to that justice movement in the first place. So yeah, I would say that was two different ways of shaping my reality that helped me get to know myself better. It is never, never, never too late to advocate for yourself and your well-being and the people who are in your community.
Well, I'm sorry that happened, but I'm also thrilled to hear that you came out on top on that one.
Poetic justice. Yep.
Yeah. And Hani, same to you, of course. Thank you for sharing that story, and that contrast is really pronounced. I'm thinking about it still. Okay, you've spent now over an hour and a half with me. Again, I am so grateful. So thank you both for being on Urgent Futures. Are there any things you have coming up that you want to point people toward?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I have a book coming out. It is called Queering Him. It's a story about an out bisexual woman and a closeted bisexual man who meet in high school and fall into a manipulative, codependent, and deeply erotic friendship. It is bicentric, literary, steamy, dark, and also hopefully educational and liberating. It's out January 13th. You could pre-order it now wherever books are sold. If you are a sad, horny, bisexual person, I think it'll resonate with you. Read it.
Amazing. I love that. I would just get people excited that Katie and I are expanding our Superhumanizer work to talk about more topics coming soon. And that will really like celebrate the entire range of things that we can speak to. Not to say that we are going to veer off Israel-Palestine completely. I don't think we will ever veer off that until there's true freedom for all in that land. But I'm excited to say that it's time for us to share more about superhumanizing and what that means in the world. And I will invite you right now, Jesse. I hope to see you on our show pretty soon. and for us to
Oh.
flip the script and talk about the urgent futures and all the awesome work you're doing. So get excited about that with Jesse coming soon on
That's very kind.
Superhumanizer.
I'm honored. That'd be a real joy for me. All right. Well, y'all, thank you again so much.
Thank you for having us. This was absolutely dreamy. What a fantastic conversation.
Yes, a gift.
This podcast is edited and produced by Adam Labrie and me, Jesse Damiani. The podcast is presented by Reality Studies. You can learn more by visiting realitystudies.co. And if you appreciate the work I'm doing, please subscribe and share it with someone you think would enjoy it.